The 2025 NASCAR Cup Series playoff schedule looks to have been officially revealed. Justin Dillon has emerged as a potential candidate to drive the 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025, and Joda Motorsports is expected to announce their driver of the 88 car for 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight on really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just show them straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Timmy Hill's 2024 Hill Motorsports scheme that we'll see this weekend in Richmond. Scheme looks pretty great in my opinion. Love the red, love the black, like the mixed colors they've got there. It looks pretty solid, and I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Richmond. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe's 2024 Renee scheme that we'll see this weekend at Richmond. Scheme looks solid in my opinion. Like the colors, love the paint scheme. It looks pretty solid, and I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Richmond. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chisholm's 2024 Jockey scheme that we'll see this weekend at Richmond. Scheme, very, very interesting to say the least. I think they did a good job using the number placement, in all honesty. I like the utilization of sponsorship. It looks pretty good. Looking forward to see on the racetrack at Richmond. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Stephen Parsons' 2024 Pop scheme that we'll see this weekend at Richmond in the truck race. Scheme looks good in my opinion. A little different than other ones they've used in the past. I think it looks solid though, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Richmond. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Allgaier's 2024 Sam's Club helmet scheme that we'll see at Daytona later this year. It's pretty exciting to see if Sam's Clubs will be sponsoring Justin Allgaier. I think they sponsored Allgaier in the past, if I'm not mistaken, but it's really good to see that they are coming back. It looks solid, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Daytona. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2024 Procter & Gamble scheme that we'll see this weekend at Richmond. I like the blue, I like the red, I like all the colors on it, and I think they do a really good job utilizing the sponsorship on this car. It looks pretty great, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Richmond. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2024 Choice Privileges Hotel scheme that we'll see this weekend in Richmond. They changed the scheme up a little bit. It's actually got a little more black, as this, of course, will be a night race at Richmond. I like this a lot. Tracka's has some pretty nice looking paint schemes. This one's no exception. It looks great. It looks awesome, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Richmond. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey LaJoie's 2024 Advisor Advantage scheme that we'll see at Richmond. I like the colors of it. We've seen Spire put out some pretty awesome banger of schemes. This one's no exception in my opinion. It looks pretty solid, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Richmond. And the final paint scheme we were taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2024 Box Top scheme, Kroger scheme that we'll see this weekend at Richmond. I think the colors are okay. JTG's been a little bit hit or miss in the past. This one's okay in my opinion. It's not the greatest paint scheme, but I'm glad to see the Kroger still working, though we don't know if they're going to be sponsoring next year in 2025. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Barnesville Truck Series race as they have a title sponsor for the event. The event is going to be called the Zip Buy Now Pay Later 200. I believe that sponsor actually sponsored New Hampshire, if I'm not mistaken, so this is going to be the second time we've seen this company sponsoring. It's a really interesting name for sure, obviously with it being a chaotic truck series race, how it usually is for some of these cutoff races. It does make a lot of sense to go ahead and have a sponsorship kind of like this. It's very solid for sure. It's pretty good marketing overall and pretty interesting to see a Zip Buy Now Pay Later will be sponsoring the Barnesville Truck Series race later this year. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. As it was reported by Trackhouse Racing themselves that Daniel Suarez is the first driver to win in 3 international series in one season in NASCAR history. Daniel Suarez, of course, this past weekend won the NASCAR Brazil Series. I talked about this on the channel a couple days ago, but remember, he did win the NASCAR Mexico Series during the Busch Light Clash weekend, right after the Busch Light Clash officially concluded, and he also won Atlanta Motor Speedway in the NASCAR Cup Series as well. It's been a really big last couple weeks for Daniel Suarez. Obviously, he got married recently, and to see he's the first driver in Cup history to have 3 wins in 3 different international series, I think is phenomenal and honestly really amazing to see for Daniel Suarez. He's accomplished a lot, and I know he's done a great thing so far with Trackhouse Racing. It's pretty exciting and pretty awesome to see that they continue to work with him, and it's pretty exciting to see that Suarez is the first driver to do this in NASCAR Cup Series history. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Coca-Cola. As it was announced earlier tonight that Coca-Cola will officially sponsor Chase Elliott this weekend at Richmond. There's been a teaser going around over the course of the last week on what Hendrick Motorsports was going to be announcing, and we now know that Coca-Cola will be sponsoring Chase Elliott this weekend. Originally, Hooters was supposed to sponsor Chase Elliott this weekend in Richmond, but remember we talked about this on the channel about a month ago that it was announced that Hooters was no longer going to be sponsoring Chase Elliott anymore because they left overall because they weren't making a lot of the payments that they were required to pay to Hendrick Motorsports. This also is the first time that Chase Elliott has been sponsored by a beverage company, I believe, since either A-Shock Energy or when PepsiCo was sponsoring Chase. And we obviously know Chase Elliott is part of the Coca-Cola racing family. I gotta say, this paint scheme looks absolutely amazing and incredible, and it's pretty cool to see that Coca-Cola is going to be sponsored. Now, I still think Denny Hamlin's Coca-Cola paint scheme is a lot better than Chase's, but this one still looks really, really good, and I think seeing that they are going to be working with Chase this weekend is pretty awesome. I like the sponsorship. I'm glad to see they're working with Chase, and pretty cool sponsorship by opinion. I love the colors. It looks very fantastic, looks creative, looks sophisticated, and I'm definitely looking forward to see his car on the racetrack. And like I said, it's really exciting and great to see that Coca-Cola will be working with Chase Elliott this weekend at Richmond. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mason Maggio. As it was confirmed by Mason Maggio himself that he'll be driving a 21 for Floridian Motorsports this weekend at Richmond. Mason Maggio has made select Truck Series starts throughout the 2024 season where he's actually had some really solid qualifying performances, has had some decent races, but hasn't had the finishes to really back it up. I believe Mason has only had one top 30 finish so far this year, but Mason does have a lot of talent. I've seen what he's been able to do at times, and he can absolutely for sure get the best out of equipment. So this is a fantastic opportunity for him. I really hope he can make the best of it and have a great run this weekend at Richmond. There are 37 trucks running, so he'll have to qualify his way in, but luckily there's only one that's going home because a 27 Raymond Brothers truck has withdrawn from this weekend. So there is a good chance he makes the field, and he's qualified pretty well, so I could definitely see Mason Maggio having a really good chance and opportunity to be able to easily make the show in field this weekend at Richmond. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joda. As it was officially confirmed early this morning that Joda will officially be switching to Cadillac in the World Endurance Championship in 2025. Over the last couple weeks or so, last week or so I should say, there's been a lot of rumors that Joda was going to be switching from, I believe, Porsche, if I'm not mistaken, or Porsche, to switching over to Joda, basically the Cadillac for the 2025 year. With it being required for the World Endurance Championship that they're going to have two cars, we know that Chip Ganassi Racing, of course, will not be part of Cadillac. They're expected to go back to Acura or Honda for 2025 or be Acura for the first time, and that means that Joda will be replacing the Cadillac brand, which, of course, is the Chip Ganassi Racing organization for next year. This is absolutely huge. Obviously, they've grown a lot, and they've had a lot of success in the world of the World Endurance Championship. We obviously know that going into next year, Meyershank Racing with Andretti Global is expected to switch over to Cadillac next year in IMSA. We're not sure if Andretti will be switching over to Honda in IndyCar, though Andretti is rumored to be going to NASCAR as well. So it's very interesting stuff for sure nonetheless. But I think it's absolutely huge to see a big team like Joda is going to be switching over to Cadillac for next year. It's a massive deal in my opinion because Joda has been one of the biggest brands in the World Endurance Championship in recent years, and now they're going to be working with Cadillac starting in 2025. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ty Dillon. As it was officially confirmed that Ty Dillon will drive the 16 for Kaulig Racing this weekend at Richmond. Ty Dillon has made select starts so far in the NASCAR Cup Series with Kaulig Racing in the number 16 car, and let's be real and honest, the results have been kind of lackluster, though let's be real and honest, Kaulig Racing has not been the fastest organization so far in the 2024 calendar year. And I do think that Ty Dillon could do better, but again, the equipment that Ty Dillon is in, let's be real, is not the fastest equipment out there because Kaulig has definitely taken a little bit of a step backwards this year compared to where they were in 2023 and even in 2022. There were times on the short tracks last year, while they weren't fast, super quick, they did have some good runs. So I'm not expecting much this weekend from Ty, unfortunately. I think he finishes most likely outside the top 30, unless a lot of attrition comes in, which we could end up seeing for sure this weekend, but we'll have to see what he does, and hopefully Ty Dillon could have a solid and good performance this weekend with Kaulig Racing at Richmond Raceway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Retzlaff. As it was announced yesterday that Parker Retzlaff will officially make his NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend in Richmond, driving number 66 car for NBM Motorsports. Originally, Parker Retzlaff was supposed to make his NASCAR Cup Series debut at Daytona International Speedway in a couple weekends, driving a 62 car for Beer Motorsports. However, NASCAR wants Parker Retzlaff to get a little bit of experience in a Cup Series car in the next-gen era on like a short track, so he does have a little bit of experience before he jumps completely into a Cup Series car at Daytona International Speedway. Now, this is a new policy NASCAR has been doing for the last 5 to 10 years. We saw this with Shane Van Gisbergen and obviously earlier this year, where they just wouldn't let him drive in the Xfinity Series and make his debut there. They forced SVG to run in the ARCA race with Pinnacle Racing Group so he could have a little bit of experience there, or could have run the Truck Series race as well. I think Parker's a really talented race car driver. He actually, of course, qualified very well at Richmond earlier. I think he actually won the pole earlier this year at this track, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Parker Retzlaff could have a really solid and strong performance, though NBM doesn't have the fastest equipment. If ECR finds a way to work with this team to try to get him the best equipment, I could see him doing well, but I think he's also driving a Ford, so I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire. Nonetheless, it's a great opportunity for him, and I'm glad to see that Parker Retzlaff will get to make his NASCAR Cup Series debut with NBM Motorsports this weekend at Richmond. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about lightning. Now, if you watched the ARCA race this past weekend at Elko Speedway, there was a big storm that was around the area, and there was actually a lot of concern that the race at ARCA, the ARCA race at Elko, was not going to be able to officially be completed. And there basically was a lot of lightning around the racetrack. Well, NASCAR said earlier today, when speaking to reporters, they says that NASCAR says the lightning strikes were outside of the 8-mile radius at Elko Speedway. For those who don't know, NASCAR has an 8-mile radius, not just for NASCAR events, but for ARCA events as well. If there's lightning within an 8-mile radius, NASCAR forces everybody to basically get off the spotter stands, among other things, get off the TV cameras, among other things, and they basically tell everybody to get off so that they can basically take cover, and they have to wait for 30 minutes before it clears. If lightning strikes within that 8-mile radius again, they will reset the clock. This has been a normal procedure NASCAR's had for the last 10 years, really ever since what happened in 2012 at the Pocono 400, or the second race at Pocono. And I think this is a very, very good policy. The fact that lightning did not reach an 8-mile radius is really shocking. Some of the photos that surfaced from that I thought were absolutely amazing and incredible. And I'm glad to see at least that we know that there wasn't lightning at the 8-mile radius. I know Charles Crawl, who does a lot of PR work for ARCA, he said the same thing as well. So at least we got some clarification from multiple people who work within NASCAR that kind of knew what it was. I'm glad to see that cleared up. There's a lot of people saying there was lightning between there, and I'm glad to see that we know the truth now, that there was not lightning within the 8-mile radius that could have required a stoppage for 30 minutes. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Riley Herbst. As it was confirmed from Rick Ware Racing that Riley Herbst will drive the 15 car for Rick Ware Racing this weekend at Richmond. This, I believe, will be the third or fourth start for Riley Herbst this year in the NASCAR Cup Series, as Riley has made multiple starts with the number 15, I believe the 36 car as well. He drove in the Daytona 500. He's also driven some other super speedway races with Front Row Motorsports, and has also made multiple starts with Rick Ware, including at Kansas Speedway earlier this year, where unfortunately crashed out. I think he's made a few other starts like at Nashville as well, where I think he sadly crashed out of that event as well. Riley Herbst obviously is getting a lot more prepared because there's a lot of talk that he will move up to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. And I think Riley Herbst getting this experience at a short track like Richmond after also picking up the Xfinity win not too long ago at Indianapolis, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to get as much experience as possible. We've seen Rick Ware show a lot more pace and speed this year, and while I don't think Riley Herbst is going to set the world on fire this weekend with Rick Ware, I do think that Riley Herbst could maybe get at least a top 30 finish, because we've seen the Fords are really good at these types of tracks, and we've seen Justin Haley do an extremely good job, which we're going to talk about him here near the end of this episode. But overall, it's really, really great opportunity for Riley. I hope he can do a really great job this weekend, and we'll see what Riley Herbst can do in the number 15. We'll see if he can have a great performance with Rick Ware Racing this weekend at Richmond. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeffrey Earnhardt. As it was announced yesterday that Jeffrey Earnhardt will drive the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing next weekend in Michigan and in the season finale for the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Phoenix. I believe Jeffrey's made a few starts so far with Sam Hunt Racing in the 2024 season. It was unclear how many races he was going to make this year with the team and organization, but he of course has also driven for this organization in the past. He's had some decent runs with his team, especially on Super Speedways. I think he's gotten a couple top 10s with this organization as well. And remember, Michigan is technically going to have a Super Speedway package. So with that experience with Super Speedways, especially remember what he did in that 3-car Bristol Racing a couple years ago, I really do think that Jeffrey Earnhardt could have a really strong and great performance those weekends. We've seen Sam Hunt show some good pace and speed this year, especially with Corey Heim, who has ran quite well with the organization when he's ran in this car, and he does have a few more races scheduled for later this year. I don't expect Jeffrey to run extremely well, except at some of the super speedways going forward, but it is a fantastic and great opportunity for him, and I really hope he can absolutely make the best fix. He is a talented driver. He can sometimes do well, and I do think that we could see Jeffrey have a good run. We'll see what Jeffrey can do in the number 26 car for Sam Hunt Racing this weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend in Michigan, and later this year at Phoenix. Good luck to Jeffrey in those races coming up later this season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Conor Zillich. As it was officially announced on Monday that Conor Zillich will drive the 7 truck for Spire Motorsports this weekend at Richmond. Conor is scheduled to run around 3 or 4 Truck Series starts throughout the rest of the year as he just turned 18 years old. We're going to talk about Conor also later in this episode because he might be moving up full-time to the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but he's getting another opportunity with Spire. Remember, in his Truck Series debut earlier this year at Circuit Americas, he qualified on the pole in pretty dominating fashion there. He missed the first corner, unfortunately had a flat tire and had to come down pit road, went a lap down because some of the damage from the suspension, and still bounced back and finished in 4th place. Conor is one of the best up-and-coming talents currently at the moment, and I think he actually is one of the favorites to win. Despite the fact he's never ran the Truck Series at a short track, I think Conor's got a really good chance and opportunity to win this weekend. He's one of the favorites going in. The pace and speed has been there for that number 7 truck this year. Kyle Busch has picked up multiple wins and victories, and we've seen drivers like Sammy Smith as well do very well in the same equipment. I expect Conor to do a really strong job this weekend. I think he's going to be a major threat and contender for the win. I know he's going to have to go through guys like Christian Eckes and Corey Heim for the win and victory, but I do think he's going to have a really awesome and great chance and a strong opportunity to pick up the win this weekend at Richmond in the Truck Series, which of course Saturday night the weather could be pending as there's some big weather affecting the area this weekend, but I do think that Conor Zillich will have a great chance and a strong opportunity to do really well in the number 7 truck this weekend at Richmond Raceway. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bristol Motor Speedway. As it was reported by Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic in the New York Times that Bristol Motor Speedway is expected to host an MLB game in 2025. And according to Jordan, it will be between the Atlanta Braves and the Cincinnati Reds. Now, I did not able to read the article, so I'm not entirely sure when the game is exactly supposed to happen, but the official announcement for this is expected to come out on Friday. So a few days from now, you will see this announcement. There's been rumors of speculation about this. Remember, it was originally, I think Chris Myers mentioned this on Fox, if I remember correctly, during the Bristol weekend, that he did say that they are expecting that there is going to be an MLB game at Bristol Motor Speedway. Now, we have seen some major events happen at Bristol in the past. Remember, back in 2016, during one of the college games, I believe Tennessee played against another big college 8 years ago, which was called the Battle at Bristol, which got a lot of attention. ESPN broadcasted that event. I think Alan Bestwick was also part of that broadcast as well. So this is nothing new. Now, the big question is, could it break the record attendance? Because we know Bristol can hold about 145 to 150,000 seats. So if I'm not mistaken, with the MLB, I think the record is 129,000. So we might end up breaking the record. And we know there's going to be some NASCAR fans, especially, that are probably going to be going to this game, especially. Because while the Atlanta Braves, Cincinnati Reds may not be the greatest organizations out there, they're still 2 of the most popular organizations. And this is going to be kind of like the Field of Dreams game that they've been looking at for a while. And I'm honestly looking forward to this. And I think the fact they're going to be doing this as a Field of Dreams game for next year, quintessentially, is huge because Bristol is an historic stadium. Amazing racing's happened there for many, many years. It's going to be hosting a playoff date once again. And having it as an MLB game for next year is honestly huge. And once it does get officially announced, I'd imagine it's going to be during the summer summer, probably around the All-Star break next year is my guess when this game is going to happen, and we'll officially get an announcement on that on Friday, which I think is very exciting too, because the fact that they're going to be hosting a game at Bristol Motor Speedway is incredible. I was excited about the college game that they had here not too long ago, and the fact they are actually going to be doing this is really awesome to see. So I'm very happy about this news for sure, and I'm glad to see that Bristol Motor Speedway will get the opportunity and the chance to host an MLB game for 2025. It's really exciting and great stuff overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we were talking about Adam Stevens. As it was announced yesterday that Adam Stevens has suffered an injury throughout the vacation on his knees and both his knees, and because of that, Adam Stevens will not be at the racetrack this week in Richmond and for the next couple of weeks. His crew chief for Christopher Bell is going to be Chris Sherwood, who has been the lead car chief for Christopher Bell for the last few years. This is absolutely shocking. Now, Adam Stevens did reveal the injury, I believe, on Sirius and NASCAR Radio. Apparently, he was in the pool, basically doing a bunch of diving, if I'm not mistaken, and basically he kind of scraped his knees up and has been injured. I believe he had to have surgery on this very recently as well, if I'm not mistaken. Now, it's unknown how long we're going to see Adam Stevens not as the crew chief, but Chris Sherwood is going to get the chance and opportunity to step up for the next few weeks. I think Chris Sherwood has done some crew chiefing in the past as well, but if he hasn't done it, this could be the first time. And honestly, it's going to be huge for Christopher Bell because we're getting really close to the playoffs. And while Christopher Bell most likely isn't going to win the regular season championship, you need to have your crew chief there, and hopefully he can recover from this so he can be ready for the playoffs, because I think Adam and Christopher have both worked together extremely well. They've had a lot of success. They've done a lot of great things together. They've already won 3 races, and they probably could have had more wins so far with the pace and speed they have shown this year. So it is disappointing to see this news for sure, and hopefully we can see Adam Stevens recover from this injury so he can get back to the racetrack really, really soon. We've seen some pretty big injuries in the Toyota camp recently, and I really hope they can find a way to not have these issues again. Well, not issues. Sometimes you can't control what happens, especially when you're on vacation from a break. It's good to see at least though he's recovering from it. He will be in the war room at Joe Gibbs Racing, so he'll still be kind of making some decisions. So I do expect a lot of the strategy calls to come from Adam Stevens, despite the fact he won't be at the racetrack. He will be in the war room at Joe Gibbs Racing at the shop. So at least we know he'll still be active with the organization. He just won't be at the racetrack the next couple of weeks. It is unknown and unclear when he is going to be back at the racetrack. My guess, he probably won't be back for at least the regular season. I imagine he might not come back for about a month or so till we get to the playoffs, which start in the first week or the second week of September after the Southern 500 concludes. They do kick off early, I think around Watkins Glen, if I'm not mistaken. So very interesting stuff to kind of watch for as well, and we'll see when he does make a comeback. I'm wishing the best of luck to Adam Stevens, and I am hoping for a well and speedy recovery for Adam Stevens so he can be back to the racetrack as quickly and as soon as possible so he can be back there to crew chief for Christopher Bell for the remainder of the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Travis Peterson. As it was officially confirmed earlier this afternoon that Travis Peterson will be the crew chief for Michael McDowell in 2025 on the number 71 car. This has been rumored and expected over the course of the last couple of weeks. Bob Pockers had initially reported that he did expect that Travis was not going to be returning to Spire Motorsports next year and was going to be following Michael McDowell over to Spire Motorsports. This is an absolute massive pickup for Spire Motorsports and also Michael McDowell as well. Over the last 2 years, Michael McDowell and Travis Peterson have formed a ton of chemistry, and their performances have really spoken for themselves. They both have really shown some speed, and while some of the stats have not been as good for Michael McDowell as it was with Blake Harris, remember Michael McDowell picked up the win with Travis Peterson as the crew chief at Indianapolis last year. And I feel like there's been times, and we've seen how good their qualifying pace and speed has generally been together. So they've had some really good runs, and they've shown some pretty impressive and great speed. Now, this is a huge deal for Spire because they keep investing in a lot of things. We know Ronnie Childers is going over to Spire next year. And I think that this duo, though, of Travis Peterson and Michael McDowell is going to make that 71 car a lot faster. Now, I'm not saying Zane Smith has been absolutely horrendous, but let's be real. Zane Smith has struggled immensely so far in 2024. And I don't know what Zane Smith is going to do at this point for next year, but I think Michael McDowell is going to do a lot better in that car. We've seen Spire show some good pace and speed, and bringing Michael McDowell over to organization next year and having Travis Peterson along with him for 2025 is going to be absolutely huge. I expected to be a pretty big year for the Spire Motorsports organization, and I do truly believe that Travis Peterson is really going to bring a lot of benefits to the organization and team for 2025, and I do expect that, like I said, this is going to be a massive and huge year for the Spire Motorsports organization. I really like Travis Peterson, what he's been able to do. He came from that RFK stable, and they've been bringing in a lot of people. There's rumors of Andretti potentially coming in as well, so we know for a fact that that could end up happening. Now, the big question is who's going to drive the 7. We're going to talk about it in a little bit, but we now know Travis Peterson's a multi-year deal as well for him to be the crew chief, and we know they're paying a lot of these crew chief as well to bring in a lot of money. As much as Front Row has been growing, if you got money from Spire Motorsports and they're asking for you to come over and they're bringing a lot of that money from Gamebridge, it does make a lot of sense. So overall, this is really, really great news to see, and pretty excited to see that Travis Peterson will get the chance and opportunity to continue working with Michael McDowell for the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season with the Spire Motorsports organization. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about investors. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Monday that new rules in NASCAR is included in charter drafts around private equity includes a prospective ban on sovereign wealth funds, which would prevent the likes of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund from investing in teams. It continues on by saying that there are some organizations that are interested in working as an investor group. One of those is the Steinbrenner family. According to Adam Stern, the Steinbrenner family are among those who have kicked the tires in investing in NASCAR. He continued on by saying as well in the article that the trend also has some wondering if a firm could try to persuade Dale Jr. to take Junior Motorsports to Cup if it pays for the charter. Let's begin by talking about this. We've talked about the charter agreement over the course of the last few weeks, really the last few months, and charter talks are really heating up. Over the weekend, we got a little bit more of a positive report in regards to the charter agreement where it looks like things are kind of starting to head toward the right direction. We do know that the teams and NASCAR have agreed to a revenue split, so they do agree on how much revenue they are going to be getting, but they're wanting charters to become completely permanent, and they're wanting governance in NASCAR. So at least there's some slight improvement. And the fact we just got another article kind of showing that there are teams becoming interested is absolutely huge. But first thing, talking about the sovereign public funds. Not having Saudi Arabia invest in your sport is honestly a good thing. We do not need another Live Golf situation. We've seen the Live Golf stuff with the PGA versus Live Golf. We don't want that situation coming around in the sport. So I think this is overall a really positive and a great step in the right direction for NASCAR. Because obviously with the charter agreement, everything's been a little negative on NASCAR's end. Even though NASCAR does have more leverage than the teams do in this situation, I think this overall is a step in the right direction for NASCAR to be at least on a public light. And not having Saudi Arabia spend money in your sport is honestly not a bad thing. Let's move on to the second point, the Steinbrenner family. The Steinbrenner family owns the New York Yankees, and they are involved with one organization, IndyCar, Andretti Global. And when we talk about Andretti Global, there's been rumors and speculation that Andretti Global could be joining the NASCAR Cup Series potentially and may possibly be partnering up with an organization like, let's say, Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports is sponsored by Gamebridge, who of course is owned by Dan Towers, who of course is a co-owner of the Andretti Global organization, is also part of the Guggenheim brand as well. That would be absolutely huge to have the Steinbrenners come in. If we know they're watching everything closely between Andretti Global, that's what Adam reported in this article as well. They are watching very closely to see what Andretti Global is doing with Spire Motorsports, and some do believe that the fact they've kind of said that they are planning to do it, there's a very good chance in the next 2 years that you're going to see potentially Andretti come in. And then we finally get to the Dale Jr. stuff. Obviously, over the last couple years, since 2021, there's been a lot of rumors and speculation, and people like myself have been speculating that Dale Jr. could join the Cup Series in the future. But Dale Jr. has denied that because of the fact that charters are very, very expensive. But let's say an investment group like maybe the Steinbrenners or an investment group like we've seen with Trackhouse Racing, which we'll get to in a second. We've seen these new investment groups come in, and if some big investor wanted to spend a lot of money, they could find a way to help Dale Jr. find a way himself into the NASCAR Cup Series with JRM. And obviously the catch is that Jr. will not be paying for the charter himself. The investor coming in, like some of these big wealth funds that we've been seeing, I think that could definitely be a way for Dale Jr. to get in. Now, do I think Dale Jr. is fully going to join the NASCAR Cup Series? Probably not at this time. I think he's absolutely focused on trying to make his Xfinity Series program go as quick as he can. But I think it'd be really awesome to see Dale Jr. maybe have the chance and opportunity to bring Junior Motorsports in, as I think it'd be really, really huge. But going back to this stuff with the investment firms, this is nothing new in NASCAR. We've seen, of course, the Herbst Blizzard Group come in to work with Joe Gibbs Racing very recently. And we've also seen other companies like Mark Lasby's group, the Avenue Sports Fund. Mark Lasby left the NBA. He worked as the owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. And now, of course, he's working with Trackhouse Racing, bringing in a lot of money as well. This is something that's going to be a continuous trend going forward. We are going to see a lot of these investment firms coming in, and once they do agree to a charter agreement, I think you're going to see this stack up, and I think things are only going to continue to get crazier in regards to that. So we'll see what happens in regards to some of these charter investments going forward, but I think it's really huge to see that Junior Motorsports has a little bit of interest potentially joining. We know there's some others that can work with teams like College Racing as well in the future, and we'll see what happens in regards to potential charter agreements happen in the future, especially with the fact we're getting heated up on this tells me we're getting close to a charter agreement being finalized. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, earlier today, Junior Motorsports put out a teaser trailer in regards to someone who is going to be on the Dale Jr. download later tomorrow. And it will also reveal who'll be behind the wheel of the first full-time Junior Motorsports car for 2025 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And it looks like that driver is going to be driving a number 88 car. Now, there's been some people linking maybe Carson Quaffle behind the wheel of this seat. But the big question is, who is going to be this driver? Well, I think the driver will be behind the wheel of the 88 car for Junior Motorsports full-time next year is Conor Zillich. Over the last couple months, and is actually reported by Adam Stern back in early July, that Conor Zillich was finalizing a deal to join Junior Motorsports for the 2025 season in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He was expected to be sponsored by WeatherTech for a lot of races, and we do think that Trackhouse could be involved in really helping this team grow. Obviously, Justin Marks has been working with Dale Jr. in the car store, so it would make a lot of sense. Conor obviously has a big potential to be very, very successful. And remember, Conor Zillich is also going to be making some select NASCAR Xfinity Series starts near the end of this year in the number 88 car. I think Conor is one of the best up-and-coming talents we've seen in recent years. Maybe the best up-and-coming talent we've seen since probably Kyle Larson when he came through the ranks. He's obviously won the Rolex 24 in the LMP2 class, also won the Sebring 12 Hours LMP2. He has won 3 ARCA races so far this year. He could have won in his Truck Series debut. We talked about that earlier in this episode. And I do think that if you put him behind the wheel of this car full-time, because his debut is going to be coming at Watkins Glen later this year, I think he is going to be extremely successful if he does end up going here, which again, it sounds very likely at this point that he is going to be in this car full time. So if he does end up going there, where do I think he finishes in the standings? Well, I think Conor Zillich actually will be a legitimate championship threat and contender. I think Conor will have a chance to win a lot of road course races, but I think he's not just going to be good at road courses. I think he's going to be good at all types of tracks. Not just road courses, but maybe super speedways, maybe short tracks, maybe, of course, the intermediate tracks, maybe the street course, which we know he's going to be very good at. He's got some experience on street courses and racing in the Trans Am Series, so we know he's going to be very good at those types of tracks as well. And I think him getting the chance and opportunity to join full-time would be absolutely huge. Now, if we don't see Conor Zillich get behind the wheel, who could this be? I already mentioned Carson Quaffle. Carson Quaffle's been linked to maybe going full-time with JRM next year, so that could be a possibility as well. Maybe Christian Eckes, but I don't know what Christian Eckes is doing at this point for next year. There's been rumors he can move up the Cup. There's been a lot of talk he could be in Xfinity. Bob Pockets had reported that he was probably going to be in Xfinity potentially, and there's an Xfinity Series ride in his future, so we could see Christian Eckes in Xfinity. I know someone mentioned Roger Carruth, but I don't think Roger is going to Junior Motorsports next year. I think if he does move up to Xfinity, it will be a Hendrick Motorsports, considering they do have a partnership. Some have said Corey Day as well, and there's been rumors he could make some Xfinity starts, make some more starts at JRM and late models potentially, but it's unknown at this point what's going on with Corey Day. But I think it is going to be Conor Zillich getting behind the wheel. Now, the big question is what happens with the rest of the lineup. Sam Mayer, we have heard that he might move up to the Cup Series potentially, though it may not be with Front Row Motorsports. He could go to Colic perhaps. We also think that Brandon Jones' future is a little bit in question, though he does bring sponsorship and funding with him. So he might stay at JRM next year, but we're not sure at this point. We do think potentially Sammy Smith might be back at JRM in 2025, and we also expect expect Justin Allgaier, but with the brand connection he's had, and with Kelly Earnhardt, I think, being on the board of directors for Brandt, we do expect that we're going to see him return to that organization next year. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to announcement. Once the announcement officially comes out later today, we will discuss everything about it on the episode. But the future for Conor is very promising, and I think that is who is going to be the driver behind the wheel of this car. And within the next few years, if he does well with JRM, I absolutely see him moving up to the Cup Series full-time in the next couple of years. I think Conor's super talented, and he's one of the best up-and-coming talents we have currently at this moment in the lower series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Spire Motorsports and the number 7 car and some silly season potential as well. So earlier today, Jeff Dickerson, who is one of the co-owners of Spire Motorsports and one of the presidents of Spire, was on Sirius In NASCAR radio. He says he felt bad about letting Corey LaJoie go, and he felt really bad about it, but knew that it was a performance-based situation. He also said, in regards to the number 7 car, he says that they are searching far and wide to find the new driver of the number 7 car for 2025. But he says that Ronnie Childers, who of course will be the crew chief for the 7 car next year, he is playing a major role in figuring out who that driver is going to be for Spire Motorsports next year. And they're said it's going to be someone who has a long road ahead of him, and that kind of limits some of those drivers as well. So now the big question is, when you hear Jeff Dickerson say that, who could be behind the wheel of the number 7 car next year? Maybe Zane Smith? I don't know, though, because Zane Smith hasn't had a long, prosperous NASCAR Cup Series career at this point. He's only been in the Cup Series full-time for 1 year, and while he's been getting better in the Cup Series with Spire, and I know he's got the connection with Trackhouse, I just don't know if Zane is going to end up in this seat next year. I know of some have said like Eric Jones, but Eric Jones, I think, will be returning to Legacy Motor Club next year and is expected to sign a contract extension, but that has not been confirmed at this time. I saw Toby Christie mention Bubba Wallace in his article, someone that is expected, but Bubba is expected to return to 2311 Racing next year, though the contract has not been signed at this point. And then some even suggested Kyle Busch as a candidate as well. And I know Lee Spencer brought him up as a possibility, but Kyle Busch, we know, is expected to return to Richard Childress Racing. They are expected to exercise his contract, and Kyle did confirm that at Iowa, but some have said KFB. The one name that some people have been linking to the 7 car recently, though, and maybe the lead candidate for this car, is Justin Haley. According to Bob Pockers in his most recent article that he released earlier today in regards to charters in silly season, he mentioned that Justin Haley might be going back to Spire Motorsports in 2025. Now remember, it was announced not too long ago, and actually Justin said this about a month or so ago, that he was expected to stay with Ricker Racing and be committed to the team and organization. But we know Spire Motorsports has massive and huge pockets, and they have a lot of money from the Gainbridge funding. And Ronnie Childers is apparently very high on Justin Haley. And I think he put Justin Haley behind the wheel of the 7 car for Spire Motorsports. And if he works with Ronnie Childers next year, I think that is going to be a dynamic duo. I think Ronnie Childers, we've seen Ronnie be able to get the best out of drivers and help drivers who weren't that great in Cup at times run very well. Scott Race nearly won multiple races with Ronnie Childers back in 2006, especially at the mile-and-a-half tracks like the Coke 600 and also Texas Motor Speedway. He got Brian Vickers a victory in 2013, and he got David Rudiman multiple NASCAR Cup Series victories. Ronnie is someone who can get the best out of equipment, and he's been able to also help Josh Berry be very solid as well. And the 4 team at times has looked to be the best organization, and the 4 car is currently the second highest in the standings. But I feel like there's been times where Josh Berry has been faster, and we all wish that Ronnie was going over to the Woodbars. We know we're not sure who the crew chief for that car is at this point. But Justin Haley, we've seen what he's been able to accomplish this year at Ricker Racing. He's been absolutely able to get the best out of equipment. He's ran up front on a consistent week-by-week basis at times and is sitting in the top 30 in standings. There's never been a time where that 51 car has been inside the top 30 in the standings on legitimate points. It's had top 30 speed, but they've had top 10 and top 15 speed. They've just been very unlucky at times this year. So I think having Justin Haley behind the wheel potentially of this car would make a lot of sense. And I think him going to Spire would be great. If not Justin Haley, I think Zane Smith could be a possibility. But Bob Pockers does mention, going to the next part of this story, he does think there's a good chance of Zane Smith maybe going over to Front Row Motorsports once again. Zane Smith is currently under contract with Trackhouse Racing, but Zane Smith might be leaving his contract with Trackhouse looking to have a third car. That third Trackhouse car is expected to be driven by SVG. It's not been announced at this point, but he says within the next month or so, we do think that Shane Van Gisbergen will be announced in a third car, especially with WeatherTech and Wendy's and other companies that have sponsored him. We think he'll be behind the wheel of that seat. He also says that Riley Herbst most likely is going to get the third 2311 racing car. That makes a lot of sense. Riley's bringing a lot of money in. Monster and a terrible Hertz brand is working very closely with 2311 Racing, and we know that Riley has options and maybe in trucks as well. He said that on Speed Sport earlier today, but we do expect that Riley is moving there. And then there's also Sam Mayer, who could be a candidate for front row, but he also could be a candidate for other rides as well, like Colling. And AJ Allmendinger has also been linked to be moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series once again. He may get an opportunity to drive the 16 car once again, which I think him being full-time in Cup would be a very good move as well. But going back to Justin Haley, if he does in fact end up going to Spire, I expect him to be very, very strong next year and run really well. Run better than Corey LaJoie has done. We could see Corey LaJoie go to Rick Ware. That's something that Bob had mentioned as a possibility. But I do think that if Justin Haley does in fact go to Spire next year, I think he's going to do a very solid and great job. So we'll see what ends up happening in regards to Justin Haley's future. We'll see if he stays with Rick Ware, but there is a chance he might be headed to Spire Motorsports in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about some rumors in regards to the 2025 NASCAR schedule. So earlier today, Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic and the New York Times released an article in regards of what he expects the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series playoff schedule to look like. He does know some other stuff that we'll discuss here in just a little bit, but he released what he expects and what he's heard that he thinks schedule is going to look like for 2025. And honestly, it doesn't look that great. So let's go through the playoff schedule. The playoffs are going to kick off on August 31st at Darlington for the Southern 500. Makes a lot of sense. That was expected originally that the Southern 500 was going to be back in the playoffs. It only moved out of the playoffs for this year because of the Olympic break. Obviously, this year it is the cutoff race for 2024. It will be the opening race of the playoffs in 2025. After that, on September 7th, the second race of the round of 16, Gateway, for the first time ever, will be in the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. Jordan had reported this on the download, or basically during the Teardown podcast. He said that we were going to be seeing this go into the playoffs. And I know there's been a lot of frustration from fans. Why is Gateway going into the playoffs next year? Well, there's a big reason for that. Number one, Gateway is the IndyCar race is moving to June 15th. They didn't want to have both of those races conflicted with one another going into 2025 because Fox does one network and the other would be basically on Amazon. They didn't want those conflict with each other. The second reason is because St. Louis is not an NFL town. And I think they're trying to have a lot of the races not be when the NFL is going on. Now, Gateway does need some infrastructure upgrades. I do agree with that. But I think having Gateway be part of the playoffs is actually well-deserved in my opinion. I know some are going to disagree because the racing product hasn't been amazing at the track. I've been there 2 to 3 years. But at the same token, at the same time, with how much support the track has been getting and how the fans support the track, with it not basically, even though the Cardinals could be contending for a playoff spot at that point, I do think having it in the playoffs makes a lot of sense. And finally, on September 13th for the round of 16, we'll kick off at Bristol. Makes a lot of sense. Cutoff race the last few years. That makes a ton of sense in my opinion. You didn't need to change anything for that. I'm glad it will be the last race of the round of 16. The round of 12 is going to kick off on September 21st at New Hampshire. I question this one a little bit. I ain't going to lie. Not going to lie. I think that if you're going to have one flat track, you can't have 2 flat tracks. I think New Hampshire being in, I guess, is okay. But the racing hasn't been amazing. Attendance has been hit or miss. Now, weather might not be as big of an issue, but if you start the race way too late, you might be fighting darkness. It starts getting darker a lot earlier at that point. Clocks start getting reset among other things, and it gets a little darker earlier. So if you're going to run New Hampshire in the playoffs next year, you got to start the race a little bit earlier than what you've been doing. After that, on September 28th, we'll head to Kansas. This race was the opening race of the round of 12 this year. It moves to the middle round. Kansas being the playoffs, no shocker there in my opinion. Kansas, great racetrack. I wish it wasn't a round of 8, but I'm glad to see it will at least still be in the playoffs as it absolutely should be. And then the final race of the round of 12 will be on October 5th at the Charlotte Roval. It's been expected the Roval was going to come back this year, despite fans like myself wanting the 1.5-mile Charlotte track to come back for how the next-gen car has raced in the Coke 600. But at the same token, same time, I think having a road course in the playoffs makes a lot of sense. I just feel like, though, we should be going somewhere else, like Watkins Glen perhaps, or going to another track like that in the future. But nonetheless, the Roval will be back for 2025 and probably for 2026 as well. Now let's go to the round of 8. On October 13th or 12th, we'll be racing a Las Vegas Motor Speedway to open the round of 8. Perfect. Really great decision in my opinion. Las Vegas puts on some solid racing, and I think being part of the round of 8 is a really good decision. October 19th, and this is where things got a lot of people frustrated. Talladega Superspeedway will move from the round of 12 to the round of 8 for 2025. I do not understand this move, but we'll get back to that in a second. After that, October 26th, we'll race in Martinsville for the cutoff race of the round of 8. And then finally, on November 2nd, like expected, Phoenix will host the championship race. I wish we were going to Homestead, but instead, Phoenix hosts season finale for one more year. But we could see Homestead host the championship again in 2026. Again, going back to the Talladega stuff, why in the world are we moving Talladega from the round of 12, where it's been working so perfectly for the last few years, since like 2017 or 2018, where it's worked for that long? Why are we moving Talladega into the round of 8? In the round of 8, in my opinion, it should be races based on a lot of skill. I get super speed races with the next-gen era. They have mattered a little bit more about skill. But let's be real. Super speedways should not be determining who fights for a championship. There is no way that someone who has struggled at times can get into the championship 4 because of a lucky super speedway race. And not to mention, well, yes, it's not always luck for the winner. It can be a crash that takes somebody out. There is a chance and possibility that you're going to have someone who doesn't deserve to be in the championship race get there. I don't like the fact we have a complete wild card in there. I get every track can be luck-based. But why in the world do we put Talladega in the round of 8? That does not make sense whatsoever. I think what they should have done, and this is my opinion, is they should have had Talladega stay in the round of 12 and move Kansas to the middle race of the round of 8. Therefore, you have 2.5-mile tracks where it's based on a lot more skill, and then you have Martinsville where it could be your chaotic race. You're going to have 2 potential wildcard races. Yes, I know the short track package hasn't worked as great in Martinsville, but I just am not the biggest fan of the move of them doing this. I think it's a bad decision overall to put Talladega in the middle of the round of 8. It doesn't make any sense to me because a racing product, you're going to get a crapshoot at some point if you continue to do stuff like this. Not a big fan of that move overall. And finally, last thing noted, if Mexico City does end up getting on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, it will replace one of the Richmond dates, and it will happen instead of in March. It will happen on June the 8th, where Gateway was supposed to take place. It'll be like a conjunction weekend where it'll be Mexico City before Sonoma weekend. We do not know what race will be on June 1st at this time. There's rumors that Dover might move to July potentially. There's rumors of Michigan moving a little bit earlier recently. There's just a lot of crazy things that are going to happen with the schedule. The fact we're getting more schedule news tells me we're getting very, very close to getting a release. I'm not a big fan of the playoff schedule, though. It doesn't look great in my opinion. I'm glad Gateway's in the playoffs, and I'm glad to see some other stuff happening. I hate the fact that Talladega is in the round of 8. It just does not make sense, in my honest opinion. So, that is your today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links to below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about the 2025 playoff schedule? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think is going to be driving for Junior Motorsports next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And who do you think drives 7 car for Spire? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. In a couple hours, we're going to see the video on who's driving that car for Junior Motorsports. We'll do a special broadcast on that. And we will also do the Truck Series race picks for Richmond as well. And then Thursday, we'll have race picks for the Cookout 400. And we'll also have the paint scheme video for the Cookout 400 as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.